Hey, yo, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. It is Sunday, and what better thing to do than talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers as always? Welcome to BTSC, Behind the Steel Curtain, and the family of podcasts. Today, it's the Steelers Sunday, and we're going to talk about all things Steelers, and maybe a little then some too. My name is Brian Anthony Davis. You could call me Bad. I am the podcast producer or what have you of Behind the Steel Curtain. Along with me today is the deputy editor of Behind the Steel Curtain. His name is Michael Beck from way up north. MB, what's going on, my friend?
Oh, having a nice little Sunday morning here on the West Coast. It's a little bit earlier out here, I guess. So still just heading into lunch hour here, enjoying a nice sunny day. Maybe go out for a drive later, just to enjoy some good weather that we don't get all the time. So just living it up here in the Great White North. It's not so white out here on that West Coast, but doing pretty well. How are you doing, Brian?
You know what? The way you started out, I thought you were going to, pay tribute to Frank the Tank, Will Ferrell from Old School. I have a nice little Saturday going on. Maybe Home Depot, a little Bed Bath & Beyond. Who knows where it's going to take us? So that sounds like what you're saying. And I love the Red Dragon, Frank the Tank. So, I'm doing well, Michael Beck. I'm doing real well. As always, I'm excited to talk about Steelers. Before we get into that, I've had an eventful week in a good way. As a lot of people know that I am involved in scouting BSA. And so with the Scouts and my troop 66 out of Maryland, had the honor of going to camp this week. Now, of course, because of COVID-19, it was cyber camp this week, where we try to do as much as possible. A lot of the merit badges, a lot of the things through the computer, but also the opportunity to have them get out and record the stuff that they're doing, them doing the activities with social distancing in mind. And I'm very proud to say that not only were they the 2015 champs, the 2018 champs, but Spirit Day 2020 champions, my boys, I'm very proud of. So congratulations to my guys.
Good job.
So nice there you go. And I made the trophy. So, but we had a virtual camp out, and I wanted to go ahead and present them with something. So they had something to be very proud of. There is going to be an actual trophy that they'll be engraved upon, a little cup. So I just wanted to shout out to those guys because, they didn't get a chance to go to camp, but they tackled it with the same spirit and competitive fire that they always do. So I'm really proud of them. And me, I'm a little competitive too. I don't know if that's something you've noticed, but I could get when the task is at hand, I get going. So I'm so proud of these guys. So lots of great names that I'm seeing popping up in the live chat right now. I'm seeing Snowman, David Nolan, Kathy Fared, Just Me, Reed Overin, Jesse George, good friends of the show. Steelers Pittsburgh's here. Carson Wright, thank you for coming in. Jared Devil, my man. So many people popping in, hanging out with us on a Sunday. And once again, we can't do these shows without you. And we love the fact that you're coming in. If you want to support the show, all you have to do, if you haven't done it, is subscribe. Tell friends about us. And extend it to Steeler Nation, because there's a lot of people in Steeler Nation that don't know that we're out here talking every single day about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you have a voice too, just like everybody in the live chat. So tell a friend, make sure everybody knows about it. It keeps us going and keeps us charged up. So that's where we're going. Michael Beck, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be in camp pretty soon with that agreement that happened about Friday. Now we know that there's going to be football in some shape. Now with Major League Baseball starting up, not too great for the Pittsburgh Pirates, but with them starting up, that it's possible to have sports without fans. It's possible to have sports, and it looks like it's even more possible to have football this fall. How are you feeling about all that, Michael?
Oh, as a giant sports nut, I am completely thrilled. I couldn't be more excited for football to be back, for, well, everything coming back seemingly in the next week here. I know hockey's hitting the ice again. The NBA tournament is going down in Orlando. Major League Soccer's back. Of course, opening day for baseball was just a couple days ago. It's a good time to be a sports fan again. At least we have it on TV. Not being able to go to games suck, but actually being able to watch those live sports, it's filling that empty void that it left behind in my heart a few months back there. It's definitely the way I usually spend most evenings, or even writing about, talking to all my buddies about. So it seemed like there was a giant hole in my life, but it's coming back. We have sports again. It's thrilling, it's exciting, and especially Steelers football, the most important one to I think all of us here today. So really excited to see the guys going at it again. Of course, there's a load of storylines in training camp. So once we get underway, I'm sure it'll be easier for you and I to make some content. But it's an exciting times for Steelers Nation, and exciting times to be a sports fan.
Yeah, it definitely is. And you were talking about adapting, how everything's different in 2020, and it's going to be. I was talking about my scouts, how they've adapted, and we can adapt as sports fans, but the bottom line is it's here in some way or shape or form, and we're so happy to have it back. So that's great. Lance Williams, who is not on the show today, he's checking in, and his daughter Olivia is turning 13 today. So that's just absolutely fantastic. Happy teens to Olivia. I mean, that is awesome. Lance, a fine young lady that you're raising there. We're so proud to have her a part of the BTSC family as well. So happy birthday, Olivia. And it's funny because my son turns 13 in about 8 days. So Olivia and my boy Connor came into the world really close at the same time. So it's so nice to see how proud we are of our BTSC family and our families in general. So happy birthday once again, Olivia Williams. So, Michael, here's the thing to talk about. We had big news hitting the NFL yesterday, and it wasn't Steeler news, but in a way it was, because when you think about it, Jamal Adams gets traded from the New York Jets all the way to the other side of the world, close to you, Seattle. I know Seattle and Vancouver are a lot closer than New York and Seattle. Or Pittsburgh and Seattle. But so, a lot of people wanted the Pittsburgh Steelers to be looking at Jamal Adams. Come on, it wasn't really possible. But the fact that they made this deal has a lot to do with the Steelers, because the Pittsburgh Steelers made a big deal with the Miami Dolphins last September. I mean, what about 9-10 months? I'm not doing the math right now, but 9-10 months ago, they made a huge deal. And it seems like they gave up a lot less for an all-pro safety than the Seattle Seahawks did. So what are your thoughts on that trade and how it pertains to our Pittsburgh Steelers, Michael Beck?
Touch on a couple points there. I think I was also someone that was kind of looking into what potentially the Steelers could possibly move to bring in a Jamal Adams type. But at the end of the day, when that compensation came through, there's no way the Steelers were giving up 2 firsts, a third, and a starting safety. That was just not happening. I think the Jets made out pretty well, even though those picks are completely up in the air. There might not even be an NCAA season. Who knows if that gets running yet? So it might be a shot in the dark when it comes to using that first round pick next year, but they still get a load of compensation back. So in that sense, I think the Jets did all right. The Seahawks also did fine by getting one of the best safeties, if not the best safety in football. But when it relates to the Steelers and what we were able to get for Minkah Fitzpatrick, it just makes me laugh almost. We only needed one pick to get one of the best safeties there is in the game. And I know that they compare kind of close, but I think Jamal Adams having a couple more years under his belt and a couple more accolades, it might be easier to rank him ahead of Minkah. But when you look at the two names, the Steelers only need to give up that one pick, of course, and then they swap mid-round picks in where the Steelers traded up from the 5th to the 4th round. And then in 2021, they swapped the Steelers 6th for the Dolphins, 7th. So in a sense, it was a little bit less than just a first-round pick compensation. And as Steelers fans, we got to just look at Kevin Colbert and think what an absolute fleecing it was to get Minkah Fitzpatrick on this team. Of course, he still has 3 more years on his contract when Jamal Adams is 2, and we don't even know if he's serious about playing in Seattle for another 2 more seasons or if he wants to jump ship to Dallas. I couldn't even imagine if he were to leave and Seattle were to be out two firsts, a third, and Mr. McDougald. All of a sudden, you don't have a whole lot for Jamal Adams and a big hole in your roster. So I think it's super important that Seattle can get a contract together for that big price safety that they just acquired.
Yeah, that's something that I'm glad that you brought up, because that was number one for me. The fact that the Steelers have Minkah Fitzpatrick for a lot longer than the Seahawks are potentially going to have Jamal Adams. Now that could change with a big deal. I'm sure franchising, and there's so many things that you could do with him. So I understand that. And it's funny when you look at Jets fans, and not just Jets fans, but Le'Veon Bell of the New York Jets, who aren't happy about this deal at all. Jesse George brings up, you see Lev Bell crying about Adams leaving. And he also basically called him a liar. Le'Veon Bell called him a liar there too. On Twitter, Bell was saying, Adams recruited me, then he leaves. Haha. It's Jets fans are a little pessimistic. If you watch the draft every year when it was from Radio City Music Hall, they always showed the montage of Jets fans listening to the pick throughout the years, and they're going crazy with it. They get all upset. Jets fans right now are saying you traded a Pro Bowler for 2 picks, an aging safety, like an old safety that sucks. And this is just from Twitter and what I'm reading. This is not my editorial, but you're and another pick, you're trading all this and you've got nothing because draft picks could be nothing. And I don't look at it that way. Steeler fans are definitely not looking at it that way. The Jets, I feel they got a steal, but Seattle, they wanted to get their man. And, this could be a huge trade for Seattle as well. The price was a whole lot higher than what the Steelers paid for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So that makes the Steelers winners in this whole deal as well, even more. I mean, time will tell whether they paid too much of a price. A lot of people on the live chat feel that the Seahawks got fleeced. You kind of feel that the Seahawks paid a pretty penny for Jamal Adams, but we'll find out.
Yeah, you could say that the Seahawks have 2 losses of first-round picks.
Exactly, because, you also have to consider the player. And when I'm saying the character of the player, I believe that a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick comes to Pittsburgh and he's planning on being here the rest of his days. Jamal Adams, who's not afraid to ask for a trade. Now, granted, Minkah asked for a trade too, but it was a different story because Minkah felt like his team was tanking and not serious and wanted to play for a contender. Jamal wanted out. And so that's kind of something that you could look at. So, but this all leads into the Pittsburgh Steelers, Michael Beck, and how it leads into it is the fact that the Steelers, not normally a huge player on the trade market, but they've had a few deals in the last decade. Kevin Colbert is not afraid to get on the phone and make a deal. And that's what we are going to discuss next. The Pittsburgh Steelers trading in the next decade.
Right.
Michael,
so
what do you think?
Yeah, kicking things off the top, we're going to start with the most recent trade, working our way back. All these trades are going to involve some sort of player, not just swapping picks. So you won't see anything like the Devin Bush trade on here, but we will touch on a lot of those kind of big name players in and out. And kicking things right off the top, of course, we had that Chris Wormley deal. The compensation for that was a 5th-round pick back to Baltimore. Of course, a trade we don't see all the time. Of course, time will tell to whether or not Wormley even plays more than the 1 season here. But that 5th-round pick, those mid-round picks, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. So as of right now, I would grade it as a wash. We haven't seen Wormley play. We don't know if he's going to re-sign. There's a lot of question marks there. But What are you thinking, Brian? Early bringbacks on this trade. Who's the early winner? Would you say?
It's a 2021 deal, and they are giving up a 5th round pick. Is that what I'm to believe on this?
Correct.
It just depends what you get out of Wormley. I mean, it's really hard to say, but the Steelers right now are getting a proven player, and I feel he's a proven player that, with the Ravens making that trade for Calais Campbell, they tried to bring in, was it Brockers they tried to bring in from the Rams, who ended up going back, and that didn't work out. But they didn't know that wasn't going to work out when they traded Wormley. They would have never traded Wormley at that point. So they've got not only a depth piece, but a guy that could probably play a lot of football for the Steelers for an unknown 5th round pick at this point. Right now, I'm thinking they're on the better end of it because they don't have depth on the defensive line. The guy that they drafted, Carlos Davis, is not going to get an opportunity to play too much, and we're not going to hear too much from him. So I'd rather have a proven player, maybe even if it is a 1-year rental, I'd rather do it now. So I'm fine with this deal.
Nice. So moving back to the next deal, of course, one that kind of drew the ire of Steelers fans and the player himself on his exit, Nick Vannett. Of course, ran away to Denver after less than a full season in Pittsburgh for a 5th round pick. That 5th round went to Seattle, and then they dealt it again to Washington, who selected Kalecki Hudson, a linebacker, in the 5th round there. Of course, the Steelers only, I believe, got 13 games out of Vannett, and on his way out said how much he didn't care so much for his time in either stop of his young career. What do you think of this deal? Is that a big mistake that maybe the Steelers should have just signed a Luke Wilson, who's their free agent at the time, or is that a move you'd make again?
You know what? I did not have a problem with them making the deal at the time. I thought it was a deal that they had to make, especially with the fact that you did not know what you had in Zach Gentry. I don't even know if they still know what they have in Zach Gentry, but Zach Gentry was your number 2 at the time. Vance McDonald was a guy at the time that you did not know if he was going to play. You got 14 games out of him last season, but you never know with his health. So you really had to go ahead and make that deal. However, hindsight being 20/20, you probably don't do it. But my thought is you've got to make moves like that. It's you just got rid of a guy that you didn't want to cut in Joshua Dobbs. So basically you got rid of that. You traded Joshua Dobbs for Nick Vannett. All right. So that's what I'm looking at there. It's not going to go down as a successful trade. I still think you do it in that situation and not bring in a they did their due diligence. They probably did not feel that Luke Wilson or anybody else that was not employed at the time was worth it. So I still think it was a deal that you kind of have to make because it's the best deal at the time. It's going to go down in history as a bad deal. But as Mule Skinner says, they were desperate when they traded for Vannett. And sometimes you've got to make those desperation trades. Did it work out? No, because not only did Vannett not have Ben Roethlisberger to throw to him, he just was not acclimated to the system. And here's the thing about Vannett. When Vannett left Seattle, he had plenty of bad things to say about Seattle too. He just might not be a happy guy.
Definitely possible. And then I guess moving along here to the biggest trade of last season, one Minkah Fitzpatrick coming back to Pittsburgh. Of course, the 4th round pick we now know ended up being Kevin Dotson. Steelers are also picking up a 2021 7th round pick. The Dolphins, with their 1st round selection from the Steelers, took the big left tackle Austin Jackson. In the 5th round, they went after Jason Strobridge, who's a defensive end, and they also have a 6th round pick waiting for them in 2021. I think when you look at it straight up right now, there's an opportunity where the Steelers possibly even get the better offensive lineman if Dotson develops into one of those great kind of guards. He's someone that had the highest run blocking grade out of anyone. I believe he had the highest run blocking grade out of any of the interior offensive linemen heading into this year's past draft. So when you look at both sides of this deal, there's of course more unknowns in Miami, but does Minkah alone, adding that all-pro top 3 safety right now in the NFL, does that swing the deal completely in Pittsburgh's favor? Does it even matter what Miami gets here out of those guys that they drafted?
It does not matter. It really doesn't. You could say that it does, and you play the ifs and buts and candy and nuts game. But the thing is, you got an all-pro out of Minkah Fitzpatrick, and something we've been talking about since COVID-19 started. And I've been saying this a lot, and I've said this the other day too. The Indianapolis Colts didn't have a first-round pick, but they did have a first-round pick, and his name was DeForest Buckner. The Los Angeles Rams have a first-round pick named Jalen Ramsey, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have a first-round pick by the name of Minkah Fitzpatrick. So what I'm saying here, these guys are playing right away. A lot of these guys that are coming in as rookies will not be playing right away, and it will take some time. You got an all-pro already out of Minkah Fitzpatrick. You won some games that you wouldn't have already because you have Minkah Fitzpatrick. He is possibly the cornerstone of that defense, along with Watt and along with Bush. You have at your 3 primary positions on the defense, you've got a young guy that could be the face of the franchise, and we had that on a show just a couple weeks back. So Minkah alone does it. And when you look at the fact that you also got a 4th-round pick back by the name of Kevin Dotson, you've got that guy back. You were able to do well with that pick. He could possibly be very good. I mean, the 5th rounder, you don't know. The 3rd rounder, you don't know either. But with the 1st-round pick, the guy that they brought in at number 18, it's just not really enough, especially when you're looking at Jackson coming in. What was he rated as far as tackles go? 5th or 6th?
Something like that, yeah.
You've got a number 1 defensive back in the league. That's a deal that you make every single day of the week and twice on Sundays. Right.
So in that sense, before we move along to the next trade, would you be more inclined to trade more 1st-round picks now after the success of bringing back that Minkah Fitzpatrick? Is that do you think that would make the Steelers more willing even to make deals like that for potentially someone that already has that first season under their belt?
No, not really. And I know I just talked about it. I just talked about the dealing for Minkah Fitzpatrick and not worrying about having a number 1 pick. But here's the thing. You look at those other guys that the teams got, they've got to find deals for those guys a whole lot quicker. It is very rare that you get a 2nd-year player by trade. And, they only we're talking with only 2 weeks down in the 2019 season, they got this guy. So they got a guy that just came off of his rookie season. Those guys don't get traded. This is an enigma. And the reason it is because everybody knew that the Miami Dolphins were tanking for Tua. Now, it ended up being tanking for Joe Burrow, or you didn't know, and they ended up with the 5th-round pick, and they got Tua. But what I'm talking about here is they were not trying to win. And we talked about this a little earlier on the show. You had a guy in Minkah Fitzpatrick seeing all these guys getting traded, talking about being traded. He said, look, I don't want to be here if you're not playing to win. If you're taking all our resources, I don't want to be here to win either. So he's out there. They say, go ahead and explore a trade. Teams came calling. It was worth it for the Dolphins to make that trade for what they were practicing. These trades don't come around very often. Jamal Adams is going into his 4th season, right? Or is it his 3rd season he's going into?
Jamal Adams entering year 4.
Year 4. So, that's not apples to oranges either, because they're getting less time out of him. Now, Lance mentioned earlier that, hey, they might be talking deal and they might try to wrap him up soon. I'm sure they are. But players like Fitzpatrick or any player that was drafted 11th overall does not get traded in the next season. Now, we saw it with Josh Rosen, but that was a different deal because they had the number 1 overall pick and they weren't sold on Josh Rosen. This had nothing to do with the Miami Dolphins not being sold on this guy. This had everything to do with he not being happy, and we could pile up draft picks to build for the future.
Right. So then moving on to our next trade here, of course, we already talked about kind of what happened with one side of the compensation with that 5th round pick that the Steelers got that eventually ended up being Nick Vannett. Essentially, the Steelers traded Josh Dobbs to the Jaguars basically for nothing at this point now. Do you think if Josh Dobbs was on this roster, the Steelers potentially could have won more games last year, or was this kind of a whatever move?
This was a great move at the time, and the reason it was a great move at the time is because I did not think that Josh Dobbs needed to be on the roster at the end of training camp last year. I thought Duck Hodges should have been the 3rd guy, and a lot of people agreed with me, but this is where the Steelers know so much more than I do. They knew that things happen and you can go ahead and deal him where you can't deal Duck Hodges. You can go ahead and play the game, and if Duck gets snapped up by another team, that's okay. But by doing what they did, they were able to trade him right away. And they were able to trade him right after Nick Foles went down. I mean, right after week 1, he went down. They desperately needed another quarterback. They didn't know what they had in the 6th rounder, Gardner Minshew. I still don't know if they know what they have in Gardner Minshew. I think he could be a good player. But so they had to bring in a guy to back him up. And that's exactly what they did with Josh Dobbs. But I don't think Josh Dobbs would have won them any more games because Josh Dobbs did not win a game that they desperately needed. When he came in Oakland, he was dreadful in that Oakland game. And that was a very bad Oakland Raiders team as well. He could not do anything in that game. And that was a situation where they probably decided right then and there that they were moving on from him, that Mason Rudolph was their number 2 quarterback. And they were all said and done with him. But they were smart not to get rid of him. You didn't know that when they got rid of him, they did not know that they were going to be desperate for another tight end at the time, just like the Jaguars were desperate for a quarterback, a backup quarterback at the time. So you make that deal. I mean, it's a successful deal. You can't say anything about what happened on the back end trading that pick because you make that deal every single time.
Right. I tend to agree there. I think Josh Dobbs, the writing was on the wall after that Oakland performance. Of course, Ben had to come back in after sustaining an injury in that game. And I think after that moment, I knew Mason Rudolph would be that guy moving forward. And then moving forward with this list, the next trade we got here, the Steelers still haven't got used the compensation yet, but last offseason, they traded away Gerald Hawkins to the Buccaneers and a 7th round pick in 2021. And they got back a 2021 pick of their own. We don't really have to talk too much on this, but Gerald Hawkins only played the 1 season last year in Tampa, is still a free agent. So basically the Steelers traded up for free. Obviously a big win there. Brian, do you have anything you want to add to that?
There was nothing. Look, he still wouldn't be playing for the Steelers, Gerald Hawkins. So you're still giving up a 7th, but you're moving up to a 6th round next year. Great deal. Because the guys competing right now are going to be Chooks Okorafor and Zach Banner for that tackle position. Hawkins was never going to compete for that. That's a free pick.
Yeah, no kidding. And then talking about free picks, here's one that I think Steelers fans hated at the time, but probably love now. The Steelers, of course, got a 2019 3rd round pick and a 2019 fifth-round pick, which equated to Deontay Johnson and Zach Gentry, in return for one of the greatest receivers in franchise history in Antonio Brown, who today's the 1-year anniversary of him dropping down in a blimp into Oakland for training camp, and then 40 days later was no longer on that Raiders team, and to this day still isn't in the NFL aside for that one game against the Patriots. Do you think this is the greatest fleecing of a trade in Steelers history, in all honesty? Like, at the time, we thought we were giving up potentially the best player on the team for not a whole lot, and now Antonio Brown's not in the NFL, and the Steelers have Deontay Johnson and a tight end that we don't really know what we have in him. So what are your thoughts on that, Brian?
You know what? There was no fleecing whatsoever. The Steelers did not fleece Oakland in this deal. I will continue to say this. The Steelers did not get fleeced either. They had nobody. The Steelers had no chance. They got what they got, a third and a fifth, because Antonio Brown was holding this franchise hostage. Couple days before this trade was made, it looked like they were about to get the 9th overall pick from the Buffalo Bills. And he nixed that. He said, nope, not going to do it. And that's why the Bills pulled out of it. And that's fact. That is something that has been brought up, that deal was very close to being made. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was reported that it was done. Yeah. Antonio Brown just didn't want to go.
He did not want to go. So, the Oakland got screwed over, not by the Steelers, but it got screwed over by Antonio Brown as well. That whole situation, they got screwed over, and, they got nothing. They got nothing out of this guy. They lost a third, they lost a fifth, they lost a lot of credibility, but they were victims. The Steelers were victims. The Steelers were lucky that they got out when they did, but there was no fleecing because they couldn't have made a better trade. In fact, as he kept on opening his mouth, at this point, his stock kept dropping, and he was doing it on purpose. He was doing the George Costanza, how do I get fired from the New York Yankees? That's exactly what he was doing. He was trying to get fired. He hired people when he was in Oakland to figure out how he could get fired. And then he's dancing around a pool, calling his grandma, saying, I'm free, I'm free. And so that's really what happened. But the joke's on him now, because he retires last week. Then he wants to come back. He kind of unretires. He wants to come back. He is his own worst enemy. And it's really sad with the talent that he had. I hope the guy gets help.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I guess all that's left to be said is we can move on to the next trade now, because Antonio Brown is not worth talking about. I don't know anymore. But what we got next is one that I was a little surprised at. Marcus Gilbert getting sent to Arizona for 6, which ended up being Ulysses Gilbert the third. This is an interesting one because, of course, Gilbert has battled injuries. He did a lot at the end there in his time in Pittsburgh, continued to do so in Arizona. Ulysses Gilbert is looking to be a guy it's going to slot in certain situations and could potentially take that starting job away from Vince Williams. Do you think this is a win for the Steelers flat out, or do we still got to wait on Ulysses Gilbert for a season?
I think it's going to be a win, because really the Cardinals are not going to get much out of Marcus Gilbert. So actually, wow, I didn't realize that was a Gilbert for Gilbert deal.
It certainly was.
Realize that when you were saying it. So, really it was, he didn't play at all last year. He's just not healthy. In fact, I would not be surprised if he retires soon. And with the fact that you knew what you had in Matt Filer, you were comfortable, you wanted to make him a starter. I don't even know how much of a future that Marcus Gilbert had in Pittsburgh at this point. It's thank you for your great service to our organization, but it's time to move on from you. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. So I got to say right now that it's a win. This is a win trade. It might not end up being Ulysses Gilbert might not be anything but a special teamer in Pittsburgh, or he could start. But the potential of that outweighs what you had Marcus Gilbert.
Right. So moving forward here in our next trade, it's funny because the Raiders and Steelers have made a load of trades involving wide receivers the last half decade or so. And the receiver that put up the most the most yards, the most catches, the most touchdowns out of all three of the names that we'll touch on today is still on the Steelers roster, and probably the one that people wouldn't think is the most productive of the three. But Ryan Switzer comes to the Steelers from the Raiders. Steelers also picked up a 6th-round pick that they used for that fullback / outside linebacker, Sutton Smith. And the Raiders got a 5th-round pick, which was traded around a lot, which eventually ended up with Dallas Cowboys selecting someone by the name of Michael Jackson. No, not that Michael Jackson. Nowhere near that talented. Thank you, Brian, for that. Now I sang on the record, so that's awesome.
But
he's still Michael Jackson, the corner, is still playing for the Miami Dolphins, or not Miami Dolphins. He went to the University of Miami. He's currently playing for the Detroit Lions, so only 1 year in Dallas for him. So Ryan Switzer and Sutton Smith, who's cut. So basically, this trade just ends up being Ryan Switzer back to the Steelers. Do you make that trade again? I know Steelers fans aren't super hyped on him, but what do you think of that Ryan Switzer trade, and does he still have a spot on this team?
Boy, I tell you what, that was a whirlwind. I'm so confused on this trade. Yeah, because Sutton Smith ended up not being anything.
Yeah.
I don't know much about Michael Jackson in Detroit. Actually, Dallas, Detroit. No, where is he?
He was drafted by the Cowboys, spent a year in the Cowboys, got released. Now he's on Detroit. He's been on their roster, I believe, for a season or so now. Yeah, for a season. He made it through all of 2019, so he's still on their roster. And it wasn't just practice squad. He was a member of their 53.
And Switzer was drafted by the Cowboys and traded to the Raiders, or released or traded.
I think he was traded twice. What it was.
Yes. So, so Switzer is one of those guys that he's the guy right now that everybody is going to go crazy over. They're going how they should cut the guy, how they don't like him. But the franchise sees something in him more than we do. Ben Roethlisberger sees something in him more than we do. But as your 5th guy, if you sneak him on that roster, if you sneak him on the field on third and 2, you can get 3 out of that guy with just a quick pass when you have other guys getting covered like crazy. Because that is, with those tight ends, with the trust that Ben has in him, and he does not have bad hands. He has pretty good hands. He's just, everybody calls him Mr. Electric Football, and I get that. But really, if you can get 3 yards out of the guy, he could possibly do something for you. Now, I'm going to mention somebody in the live chat that is always on my side when it comes to Ryan Switzer, and that's Donald Nolan. Donald is always on my side with him. I think that he's a piece of the puzzle guy. He's maybe number 45 to 53 as far as importance, but someone like that can move the chains for you. So he's got very good hands. And don't be shocked if he is returning punts or kicks again for this team because of his hands. That's why he was there. The reason he wasn't doing it last year was not because of any explosiveness. He was there because they could trust him. And it seems like they have this theory that I don't completely agree with, but they would much rather have a good hands guy and put it in the hands of the quarterback than have somebody drop the ball, whether they're explosive or not, and give the ball back in great field position and have your defense on the field. So that kind of seems like what they want to do in that position. So, I would probably say right now that maybe advantage Steelers on that, but it's pretty close to a wash because I just don't know who Michael Jackson is.
Right. So, looking at Ryan Switzer too, of course, he posted that picture of himself looking absolutely shredded. He's been busting his butt this offseason. So power to him. If he's gonna go all out, bust his butt to work hard to make this team, good for him. If he can bounce back and Steelers fans begin to like him again, then even better. So pulling for Ryan Switzer, of course, if he's better, he makes his team better. So there's really no reason for the extra hate. But moving forward, we have an interesting trade because J.J. Wilcox and the picks involved him kind of branch out into numerous trades over the last, I don't know, kind of between 2015 and 2017. There's a lot of moves going around. But the most basic trade here for Wilcox was the Steelers getting him back, who ended up not being much more than a backup and a special teams player, and then a 2019 seventh rounder, which ended up being Derwin Gray, who's still on this roster. And then the Buccaneers got a sixth rounder, which ended up being Jack Keechie, whose linebacker is still on that team, but he only has 5 career tackles. Do you think the Steelers needed to make that trade for J.J. Wilcox? He at first, we kind of expected him to be more of a starter, play a little bit more between Sean Davis and Mike Mitchell at the time. Do you think that was a trade even worth committing, or was that just kind of a waste?
I think that trade was kind of a waste. I understood what they were trying to do at the time, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I was excited about it at the time. I remember calling up people here at BTSC and being really pumped about it, but it just didn't work. I thought it was a bad trade.
Right. And then moving backward rather, a little bit more there. The Steelers have made a lot of like really kind of lower end trades. There's one that's a little bit interesting though. They shipped off Ross Cockrell, who was a starter, I believe, for a season on the Steelers when our defensive backfield was really quite talented. Of course, being completely sarcastic there. But they moved out Ross Cockrell. And what they got back was a conditional 7th round pick. They used that pick to trade with Seattle to move up 3 more picks to select a guy by the name of Mason Rudolph. Now, of course, Ross Cockrell didn't really do anything in New York. He didn't really do a whole lot in Pittsburgh either, other than get torched here and there. But do you think that that trade was super necessary to move ahead? I believe they jumped over Cincinnati to get Mason Rudolph. All things considered, is that one they had to make, or could they have stood pat in 2018 and still gotten their quarterback?
Well, here's the deal with that, Michael Beck. That trade was made the day before the Wilcox trade was made. So this was a cut down day trade in 2017. So this was your Labor Day weekend trade where guys are getting moved. They really thought that they had something special in Artie Burns, because a lot of people don't realize Artie Burns rookie. He made it all rookie in all rookie team after his first year. It just went downhill after that. So when you're looking at the fact that you think you have a superstar, or you made a great pick the year before, then you don't worry about the guys you have around him. As far as depth, you go with that guy. So I'm gonna open up a huge can of worms here, and I know I'm going to do it, Michael. But you go back to 1990, and everybody complains about the Steelers not drafting Emmitt Smith and trading down 4 spots to the Cowboys to get an extra pick. It didn't work out. But they had just drafted a guy that they really liked and had a good rookie season for 770 some yards in Tim Worley at the running back position. So they were never going to bring in a guy like Emmitt Smith because they had their running back who they spent a first rounder on the year before. So in this goes back to this situation. They had just spent a number 1 pick on a corner the year before. And they turn around and they don't think that they need Cockrell anymore. So they make that deal. I think this is a decent deal to make. And they were able to go ahead and get the backup quarterback of the future that they wanted, who became a starting quarterback in 2019 because of circumstances. Whether you like Mason Rudolph or not, that's a trade that you're going to make. You're going to trade up for that extra 3rd round pick to go ahead and get a guy like that, because this is a guy they had a 1st round grade on. So as far as the Cockrell trade was a good trade, and it helped aid in another trade.
Exactly. So when we're looking at that first part of that Mason Rudolph deal, he was, of course, brought in with a third-round pick that originally wasn't even the Steelers. It was a Raiders pick. When the Steelers sent Martavis Bryant over, just another receiver that flamed out of the NFL once he ended up on the Raiders roster from the Steelers. Of course, Martavis Bryant trying to make a comeback again. Reports have come out that he's not trying to come back in 2020, but might try to make those steps back in 2021. But the Steelers originally just dealt Martavis Bryant straight up to the Raiders for a third-round pick in 2018. Of course, that trade ended up working out pretty well because Bryant is no longer in the Raiders. But essentially, this boils down to Martavis Bryant and Mason Rudolph. Do you think, when you compare those two names, do you think the Steelers are the winners sitting here today?
Absolutely. Look, nobody got anything. The Raiders hardly got, what did they get? About 300 yards out of them, one touchdown, or maybe a little more than that. I don't even know his stats, but they didn't get a lot out of him whatsoever. There were reports that he failed so many drug tests, but not just because he failed them, because he skipped them too. So he skipped a lot of drug tests as well. So, and that's an automatic failure in the eyes of the league. And it's, I mean, like if you're going to skip one, that means you have something to hide. And that's the problem here. So he was going to fail either way. So I guess he would have rather skipped a test than, failing it, because if you're in trouble either way. He smoked his way out of the league. He might have done a little more that we don't know about, but it's just a shame. I hope he gets his head on straight and comes back. I don't care if he comes back with Pittsburgh. If the Steelers evaluate him in 2021 and they feel that he could help this organization for a prove-it deal, yeah, you bring a guy like that back. But Josh Gordon has never done anything really special with all the chances that he's gotten. He has never been that same guy. Maybe the only time he was the same guy was when it was against the Steelers. I mean, he plays well against the Steelers, but you just have a situation where he's damaged because of the choices that he made. So, yeah, you're going to take Mason Rudolph, whether you like Mason or not, whether you feel he got messed up in that Myles Garrett incident, whether you feel that he's never going to be a starter. They got a better end of the deal. That's a trade you make. Look, those draft picks don't always work out for some reason or other. There's a lot higher draft picks for a lot of teams that didn't work out. We complain about the Jarvis Jones deal, the Jarvis Jones drafting all the time, but the Steelers have a lot less as far as bad draft picks as well, Michael.
No, it's true. It is true. And then I guess moving forward here, we have a couple trades that I think kind of go hand in hand, because it ended up with the Steelers, of course, making that deal for J.J. Wilcox. The first of the two deals here, if I have it right. So the Steelers, they picked up Justin Gilbert from the Browns. They sent them their 6th-round pick, and the Steelers ended up getting that 6th-round pick back in a deal when they sent Sammy Coates to the Browns. So sitting here now, the Steelers got Justin Gilbert, a 6th-round pick that they traded away for J.J. Wilcox. And what they ended up giving away ended up being Sammy Coates, essentially. And that is about it. Justin Gilbert is one of those interesting players. Never really did a whole lot on the Steelers. Sammy Coates, that was one of those picks where everyone was like, "Oh, the Steelers draft receivers so well," but then that was one that kind of didn't work out, and we kind of sweep under the rug when it comes to drafting receivers. And then, of course, J.J. Wilcox being the guy that's coming back. Do you think the Steelers should have even bothered drafting for Justin Gilbert, or was that just another sign that the Steelers struggle so much at addressing and finding cornerback talent?
Here's the thing on that deal. I liked that deal at the time too. Deep down in the back of my mind, I didn't think it was going to work out. But I was hoping that, hey, it's Cleveland, and Cleveland doesn't know how to manage players. Justin Gilbert, from what I heard, was a guy that just didn't want to play football. His heart was never in it. And he had the talent at Oklahoma State. He was a high draft pick. I'm glad the Steelers didn't draft him, didn't get an opportunity to draft him, because if they had an opportunity, they probably would have. He ended up being fool's gold for the Cleveland Browns. He just did not work out. He looked like an amazing prospect. And we just talked about guys that drafted a whole lot higher fail. And this is a guy that just failed. You take a flyer on him, and it's not bad to take a flyer, but you look at the guys that we're talking about here, Gilbert, Coates, Wilcox, no one's really a winner here. It's a scratch. I mean, it's a draw.
Yeah, it really is. I think you find a lot of times in these most recent trades, the Steelers are typically the most obvious winner, or it's kind of a wash. Kevin Colbert just does a really fantastic job, I think, when it comes to trading. He understands his players' values, and he isn't typically the guy that's sending away a big name player. Maybe that's because the Steelers were maybe too stubborn to trade away a Le'Veon Bell, but I think the organization has done a really good job of making those trades and bringing in the talent and being either at the very least a complete wash of a trade or a landslide victor. We can touch on a couple more here. I'll kind of leave out some of the kind of like players that just end up being practice squad kind of guys. But one name that's still on the roster here is when the Steelers traded for Vance McDonald. They also picked up a 5th-round pick in that deal with the 49ers, which ended up being Marcus Allen, who's still on the team. However, he is fighting for his NFL life this offseason, this training camp. What the Steelers gave away was a 4th-round pick in 2018 that ended up being Contavious Street, who only has 4 career tackles. Marcus Allen, of course, has 2. So basically, this seems like a wash of 2 kind of depth players, practice squad type guys, and then Vance McDonald being the kind of the key here coming back to the Steelers. Is Vance McDonald, was that a giant win as it looks like, or has Vance McDonald really made that big of an impact on the Steelers team?
That is a huge deal. Vance McDonald has had contributions to the Steelers. That one year that he and Jesse James were together, they combined for over 1,000 yards and for, I believe it was about 6-7 touchdowns. That's good production out of a tight end. His time here is not done. Look how he looked in that Seattle game last year. If he's healthy, he could still remain with this team. They brought Ebron in to work to basically make one giant great tight end between Ebron and McDonald. So no, this is a win of a trade. I mean, you're looking at guys like Street that hasn't done much. Marcus Allen that might have not done much either, but they're not the players in this deal. Vance McDonald, and you have 2 guys washing each other out, and you still have Vance McDonald. That's a win every single time.
Absolutely. So I think we got 2 more deals on that I want to touch on here. And both are big slap in the face losses, I would say, for the Steelers. The first 2 of this list. Oh, goodness. So the Steelers gave away to the Jaguars a 6th-round pick, who ended up being quarterback Brandon Allen. He never actually played a game in the NFL, but you might be wondering, how could the Steelers lose a trade when they basically gave up nothing? It's because the guy they got completely cost them wins in Josh Scobie. I guess the only positive that can be brought in here was that it did end in Chris Boswell, but making a trade gave away a 6th-round pick for a guy that cost the Steelers games. It cost them that huge game against the Ravens. Is this the worst trade the Steelers have made in recent memory?
You know what? And that's a great thing if this is the worst trade that they've made. They lost on a kicker. You had to make that deal. You had to bring somebody in. You weren't losing. Who? Allen? What was his name? Brady Allen? What was this guy's name?
Brandon Allen.
Brandon Allen. Okay, it really doesn't
Brandon
matter.
Allen.
Yeah, they lost this deal because you still have to make the deal. You got to bring a kicker in. They were between losing Sweezum, then they lost Hartley. They had to bring another guy in. The 4th guy they finally hit on, but they thought they were getting an established guy. They weren't getting an established guy with Boswell. There was a lot of worried people when Boswell first started, and then they got the guy that they got. So yeah, Scobie that was an awful deal. You make it at the time. If you have the time machine, you go back and say, no, this isn't going to work out, guys. Look at somebody else. But at the time they had to make the deal, but it ended up being an awful deal.
Yeah, it really did. So let's touch on one more trade here that was brutal. Maybe you can also talk some sense into me on this one. When the Steelers got Brandon Boykin, I thought he was someone that was an outstanding corner. I even loved him when he was on the Steelers. It seemed when he was actually playing, he was picking up interceptions, and I was really shocked he didn't play more. But what the Eagles got back for that pick ended up being, I'm not even going to attempt saying his whole first name, but Halavaitai, the guard who is a Super Bowl champion, just signed a 5-year, $50 million deal with the Detroit Lions. He's one of the top guards in football. So that is a slap in the face because of how talented Vaitai is. But do you think Boykin was underrated? Did the Steelers use him right? Or was this even more of a flop than I kind of think it is?
So my thought on that is, I saw what they were doing when they made the trade. I was excited about that trade too. I get excited over trades. But here's the thing. He flamed out here. It's not the fact that they didn't use him right. They tried to use him. He just didn't have a place. He wasn't good enough to have a place. When he left, he wasn't good enough to have a place anywhere else either. So Vaitai, Super Bowl champ, he just got another deal. This was the worst deal that the Steelers made. You mentioned the Scobie deal. This is the worst deal that they made. But when we're talking about all these deals, it seems like they came out winners so much more. And if you tally them up, Michael, I don't know if you've tallied them up, but it seems like Kevin Colbert's on his game.
No, you know what? I haven't got those official numbers yet, but it seems like if there's 20 trades there, it seems like the Steelers won 15, had 3 washes, and then lost 2. And I think if you're doing that, then your organization is doing well as the Pittsburgh Steelers have been, and they've been one of the top organizations dating back to 1970. So it's obvious why they've been so successful over both of our lifetimes. So when you have guys like Kevin Colbert manning the ship, the Steelers are going to be a team that's competing for a Super Bowl each and every year because he simply makes good deals. And that's what it comes down to. That's the name of the game for being a GM.
Absolutely. So I think this was a really good exercise for us to look at the fact that you still have something very special in the general manager. It looks like the Steelers don't make trades a whole heck of a lot. A lot of them, they're wheeling and dealing a whole lot more. But it's just like the Dos Equis guy. When I do, so when he does it right. So there you go. Kevin Colbert is probably one of your MVPs over the past decade, just as well. I think Michael froze up a little bit there. So with that being said, thanks to everybody in the live chat coming up tonight. Actually today, but if you're watching this on YouTube, this is Sunday. As you know, if you're listening to it on any of our platforms,
I think I'm cutting out. Oh no.
Yeah, there you go. You're back in. We heard that. Oh no is actually swearing in Canadian. So that's what we know for Michael. But so I'm going to thank everybody for coming in and checking it out for us tonight. Actually today, I keep on wanting to say tonight, but thanks for coming in and supporting our family of podcasts. We really appreciate it. As you know, we can't do it without you. Michael Beck, thank you so much for coming in on the Sunday show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was fun. Gotta do this more, Brian.
Yeah, I love teaming up with Michael Beck. It seems like a bad internet day, but that's okay though. We'll fix that on the other end. But with that being said, thank you so much, my friends. Thank you, Michael Beck. We will talk to you tomorrow on the Steelers Q&A, and we'll have a retro show. It'll be Tony Defio and myself. Then on Tuesday, it's going to be the Sco Bros, the Stat Geek, and then Michael and Lance will be back together on Wednesday, and that is going to be the standard is the standard. So I could go through the rest of the schedule, but just join us every single day. You know you've got something good. For Michael Beck, my name is Brian Anthony Davis. You could call me Bad, and we call this a wrap. Take care, my friends.